Imagine a world that looks like this. You can still tell what the objects around you are. A plant is still a plant, your tubes of paint are still tubes of paint, and a candle is still a candle. It's readable, but not super interesting. Now let's turn on the color. That plant is now a million shades of luscious green. Each tube contains a unique world of color rather than varying shades of gray. And that candle, it's no longer just a bright spot in your vision, it's a flickering orb of golden energy. Color. It's one of the most popular art fundamentals. It's bold, it's exciting, it gives a lot of life to your art. It allows us to draw attention to our focal points and to tell super interesting stories. But it's also one of the fundamentals that we tend to underestimate when we're just starting out in our art journeys. Red and yellow make orange, yellow and blue makes green, and red and blue make purple. It's pre-K knowledge. Easy, right?
Wrong.
Let me tell you, it is deceptively more complicated than that. There's a lot more to it than we think. But that's what makes it such a superpower art fundamental. So much effort and learning go into it, and therefore so much life and pizzazz comes out in our art. Literally no one becomes an immediate master of it. If you want to get here, you have to start here. Before we can properly use it, we need to know what it is. Creativity is like being a detective. We need to observe, we need to learn, we need to problem solve. We need to have an investigation of the facts. Presenting the color theory case. Now, if you've already taken a color theory class, or even if you just took art in high school, you've probably heard this first part before, but a little refresher can't hurt. There are 4 basics of color theory. First, there's hue. These are our basic colors on the color wheel. This can also be called chroma. There's saturation, which is how dull or vibrant our color is. There's temperature, whether our color is warm or cool. And there's tint and tone. Tint is the level of white in our color, and tone is the level of black in our color. And these are the color theory basics.
Yay, you're an expert now.
Case closed. Not quite. Every good mystery involves some sort of messy relationship, and color is all about relationships. And as you know, relationships are never easy. They're confusing, they're complicated, they sometimes drive you crazy. Every facet of color is all relative compared to the qualities of the colors around it. If you put this next to this, you'd probably say, oh yeah, the swatch on the right is a warm color. But if we trade out that swatch on the left for this swatch, well, that changes things, doesn't it? Now, what previously looked like a warm, summery color now looks like it belongs in the Antarctic. I'm exaggerating, of course, but you get the idea. The temperature of one color is relative to the colors around it. Same goes for the other color theory basics. They're all relative. This color looks light compared to this color, yet dark compared to this one. I'm sure you can probably see how this makes art kinda confusing sometimes. So where do we go from here? How do we even begin to break this case down into bite-sized sandwich chunks instead of trying to shove the whole hoagie in your face? We do it one bite at a time. Let's start with our suspects. Suspect number 1, hue. We have 3 primary colors, blue, yellow, and red, though in reality they're a little closer to this. If you try mixing those original primaries, they get muddy pretty quick. Mixing our primaries gives us our secondaries, orange, green, and purple. But it doesn't stop there. You can mix those primaries with the secondaries again to get tertiary colors. These start to create more of an ombre effect around our wheel. So how do these hues relate to one another? We'll get to that in just a little bit. But first, let's take a look at our next suspects, the twins tint and tone, or TT for short. Tone refers to our color getting darker by adding black, and tint refers to our color getting lighter by adding white. We can also call this value, which is kind of its own fundamental. Understanding values is pretty crucial to understanding color. You might also hear value referred to as levels in some professions. Hairstylists, for example, use levels as a grading scale for value as well. But I'm getting off topic. Now, TT aren't exactly part of what I like to call the color wheel clique. All these basics of color go to the same school, but TT isn't really a part of the other guy's friend group. It only applies to each individual hue. Now, some color wheel designs do include it, but not very often. But anyways, back to business. Our next suspect is saturation. Our most saturated version of a color is when it's at its purest form, this vibrant outer ring of the wheel. but we can continue adding rings of saturation to make a kind of dartboard. The closer we get to the middle, the duller and grayer our colors become, till we get to the bullseye, which is just basically a big blob of gray. Now this little area is a very exciting and very underrated secret of the color wheel. In fact, it may just be the most valuable part of the wheel to use, but we'll chat about that in a second. The last member of our color wheel clique and our final suspect is temperature. Now we tend to oversimplify temperature by saying this half of the wheel is warm and this half of the wheel is cool. Now this is an easier way to look at it when you're just starting out, but it really is a lot more nuanced than that. We get the terms warm and cool from this very sciencey background where color legitimately does have a tangible temperature. Something to do with this guy named Planck and his friend Kelvin. There's iron oxide or radiation or something. I don't know. I clearly don't know the exact history. I haven't yet made a deep dive investigation into those facts. But anyways, let's spill the tea on those color relationships. How does each suspect relate to the others? First, there's hue relationships. How each hue relates to the hues around it and to the other suspects. Now these are found in what we call color schemes. I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty suspicious term to me. But I digress. Now there are a lot of different color schemes, but here are 4 of the most common. First, there's monochromatic. That's where we use our one hue and its tint and tone variations. There's analogous, which is 3 colors side by side on the wheel, including their saturation variations. Now if we have one of those seamless gradient wheels, you kinda just wing it. Eyeball what you think is approximately 3 hues, and it's close enough. There's tetratic, which is 3 colors equidistant apart on the wheel, and there's complementary, which is 2 colors opposite each other on the wheel. That last one is my personal favorite. Now saturation and temperature are all about relativity or comparison. For this, we need to focus more on movement inside the circle and less on movement around the outer ring. Like we saw earlier, this swatch is cool relative to this swatch, and warm relative to this one. Likewise, this color is very saturated compared to this one, and pretty dull compared to this one. I don't know about you, but this is very intriguing to me. This is also why color mixing can be so dang hard. Our eyes and minds like to jump to conclusions that aren't exactly accurate. In fact, they're not even close. Let's take a look at a study of a scene from Spirited Away that I did in 2021. As you can see, my study is quite different from the reference. It looks almost tropical in comparison. Now, why is this? Well, part of this was a time constraint. I was trying to create this study in about 30 or 40 minutes. Part of it was just a general lack of being able to mix colors very well, but it was also in part my eyes playing tricks on me. Let's take a look at these clouds, for example. The top of the cloud looks pretty peachy compared to the bottom. In fact, the bottom looks a lot more purple. What about this water down here in the right-hand corner? Looks pretty blue, right? But if we swatch it on top of the sky blue, I don't know about you, but that looks gray to me. Oh, and that purpley cloud color, that's gray too. And this green tree, it's actually more in the yellow-orange family. Those subtle shifts in the gray zone make our eyes and minds think that we're looking at drastically different colors than what we really are. This gray zone also means that our hues are closer together on the color wheel. The closer together they are, the more harmonious they become. This is how you can think you're seeing yellows and purples and peaches and greens, yet they all work really well together. That's why a more muted palette like this one is a lot more appealing than a very electrifying palette like this. Super vibrant colors are all competing with each other, and it creates a really jarring effect. Now, not that you can never use heavily saturated color, they're really pretty neat, and they can make a really big statement in your art, but you have to use them in terms of the colors around them. So clearly, color is not clear. Every element of color is all about relativity and relationships. And like we established earlier, relationships are messy. We make a lot of generalizations like,
Red is a warm color, or warm lights create cool shadows.
but there's so much more to it than that, which is a really good thing. Because there are so many subtle shifts between every color, we can create amazing art with so much life and dimension. Color helps us draw attention to our focal point. It helps us create moods for our illustrations, and it helps us understand where objects are in relation to one another. It really is a superpower fundamental and one that I'm really learning to love. Now let's take a look at a few quick tip clues. Number 1, the complement clue. Adding a color's complement will shift your color into the gray section of the wheel. As the two complements grow closer together, they begin to mesh in this gray zone. As the saying goes, opposites attract, I guess. Number 2, the power grab clue. Some colors are stronger than others. Let's take blue for instance. Blue's a pretty strong dude. Lots of muscle there. And yellow is mellow. Plus 200 personality, but negative 30 strength. If you mix together equal parts of blue and yellow, the color is still gonna shift much closer to the blue. Blue's a frickin' beast and will take down yellow every single time. Creating a color mixing chart with your paints can really help you familiarize yourself with the strength of your colors. Now number 3, the gray clue. I couldn't come up with a cool name for that one. Now for this last clue, I'm actually gonna send you out on an assignment to go find it. After this video, head on over to Light Pondering's channel via the link in the description and watch his video called The Power of Grays. Truly, I do not think anybody can explain this clue better than he can. Now let's chat a little bit about some of the things that have helped me learn how to use color and how I used it in these studies. So in my DIY art school video, I talked a lot about the importance of resources. No self-taught artist learns everything on their own. They're constantly learning it from other artists through books and videos, and simply by observing things in life. Take a walk around outside and look at stuff, and guess what? That's learning color theory. One of the things that really made the biggest difference in my color and value skills was taking Robert Kondo and Dai Susumi's Painting with Color and Light class on Schoolism. Now fair warning, it is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of homework involved with this one. But they do an incredible job of breaking down the science of color and light and how to use it more intuitively. Marco Bucci also has a lot of really great bite-sized color theory videos on his channel that have been extremely helpful. Being able to accurately paint realistic color and learn to see the nuance behind it is really amazing. 10 out of 10, a helpful skill to have. But there's also a lot of fun to be had in breaking the rules of realistic color and pushing color to the max. Two artists that come to mind as masters of very exciting color are Devin L. Kurtz and Mary Blair. Now, Mary Blair used a lot of very saturated and sometimes competing colors, but she did it with a lot of skill. She really understood the relationships of color and used them to create these wild and playful illustrations. Devin L. Kurtz also handles color with a lot of skill. She created this very vibrant, almost neon painting, but it's still a harmonious illustration. She also pushes color in a lot of her studies, which is something I started playing around with more toward the end of my scene studies challenge. Doing my own studies from life and my scene studies challenge were hands down the best form of practice for me. You can hear and read about all the theory and quick tips behind color, but until you learn to apply it in your art, it's not really all that useful. You gotta take that head knowledge and turn it into hand knowledge. It takes a lot of learning by practicing, a lot of learning by listening, a lot of learning by observing. And at the end of the day, no one's really a master of it. We all still make mistakes. Even the art kings and queens of color still struggle with it sometimes. No one is perfect at art, and perfection is really just not the point. Like everything, it takes time and effort and a willingness to be bad at it. But color is such an amazing tool to use, and it is absolutely worth it. In the study from Princess Mononoke, I really wanted to play around more with the juxtaposition of warm and cool colors. Throwing a little bit of muted purple into the shadows of the tree on the right, shifting the saturation up a notch in that muted blue patch on the left tree. I wasn't focused on capturing the exact color likeness of the scene, more so just on taking what I saw in the scene and adding a little splash of my own. I did a similar thing in the study from My Neighbor Totoro. For the greenery, I did try to be a little bit more accurate to the reference photo. There's a ton of subtle variation in those bushes. Marco Bucci calls this sort of thing color vibration. It's those subtle shifts of hue, saturation, value, and temperature within an area to create a little bit more interest. You would still group it all together as a green bush, but there's lots of little shifts within it. Now, I wasn't super successful in imitating the reference, but I did learn a lot. For the concrete posts, I did want to liven up the colors a bit. I decided to bring up the saturation and the cool shadows on the posts and the warm edge of the left post. It wasn't a huge push of color, but it was a little dash of me thrown into the study. So color is a lot more complex than we initially think. It's an endless shift of hues into hues, tints into tones, vibrancy into grays, warms into cools. It's absolute poetry is what it is. So now we're surely experts of color, right?
We know everything there is to know. There's no major outside influence that could impact color at all, right?
Introducing light theory, which literally changes everything. But that's a case for another time. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed watching me paint these Studio Ghibli studies, and I hope you art detectives learned a little something from our foray into the wonderful world of color theory. If you guys want to see more of these educational type art videos, let me know down in the comments and let me know what you're interested in learning. I could also make a playlist of some color theory videos that I've found super helpful, if you're interested in that sort of thing as well. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye guys!